Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about unit tests. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, does writing unit tests take almost always as much time as writing the implementation logic for a software engineer? Not always, but it definitely takes time. I've had that question many times posed to me by different software developers of different quality, where they have this idea that unit test takes longer, therefore I shouldn't do it because I need to get stuff done. And so the way that I usually tell them that it sounds like a cliche, but it is true to a certain point. It's not 100% true, but there is this sentiment saying that if your tests are difficult to write, it's because your code is poorly written. And to a point, that is true. I wouldn't say that it's an absolute rule or anything like that, but it is. There's a grain of truth in that. And what I see quite often with subpar developers, who I argue is sort of has this sentiment that testing takes as long as writing the logic, and if I just do manual testing, that's fine. Like, where what happens with them is that the problem is that they can't actually see that the reason why everything is taking longer for them in the testing area is usually because they're no good at it. The reality is that simple. They're no good at it, and so it takes longer. You're never gonna you're 100% true. Sure, I can guarantee that you will never ever, of course, be able to write all the implementation logic plus the testing and then make that as fast as just writing the implementation logic, because there's more to do, physically more to do with the testing. But if you consider the time it takes in bugs, refactor risk, and general confusion for other people and so forth, the net gain, if you do this correctly, should show that this is actually a worthwhile investment. That's the entire idea behind writing tests, or in this case it's just unit tests, but that is the point of it. And so it's really difficult to, I find it all the time, to get people into this idea that it does not matter if writing a test takes slightly longer or if it takes as long as the implementation logic, because the total time that you have invested is still lower than if you don't write the test. That's not, as I said, 100% true all the time, and that's why people do the thing that I hate that they do, which is that they start sort of feeling it out. Is this worth testing? Is that worth testing? And that inevitably always leads to the same reason why most of the planet is fat. You just play it by ear, and your gut feeling always lies, and you always eat too much because you don't measure things and you don't have a routine, you don't have anything. It's why nobody goes to the gym except on Mondays after Christmas Eve, or New Year's Monday, New Year's after New Year's. That's the problem, because as soon as you start trying to figure out if you have to do it or you don't have to do it, you inevitably come to a situation where you stop doing it sooner or later, or you do it really shittily. Because, as I said, writing tests and doing it well and then having code that fits into that overall framework, like, that makes you a better software developer, but it requires practice, because you can be a decent software developer, but you can write shit code. If you want to see proof of that, go and talk to any data scientist. I'm sorry, data scientist, I'm just saying that I've always had issues. In every time I go take a computer science course, like a real data science course, or I talk with coworkers. Yeah, your coding style, I'm sorry, you're very smart, but the coding, yeah, you have your complete different way of doing it. And it's the same thing with like some people who just do ops and like do shell scripting and stuff like that. If you are a software engineer, you usually care about readability and quality of the way that you design everything and so forth and so forth. And some roles don't do that as much. And this is the thing that I have a lot of problems with, especially with the front-end developers. Holy shit, this is a problem for front-end developers. Because they are not forced to write unit tests, they never practice. And they never get any good at it, and the code suffers for it. And the implementation, although it might be quicker to do it, the time they never, as I said, they never measure the time it takes for people to maintain a shitty system. Because if you do these things correctly, the time things break or the time it takes to fix a specific component is the same thing with shitty architecture. If you do a shitty job, everything takes longer because you have more time spent on fixing bugs. You have longer times for people to figure out what to do because they're scared to make changes to the system, or if they make a change, there's regressions and they have to fix those, etc., etc. And the fundamental problem is, as sort of the analogy I did with the fitness thing is actually, to me, the thing that makes more sense. It's a question of fitness, basically, that determines how long it takes for you to write your tests. Because if you are good at writing tests and testing what is appropriate, and like you're not just being religious about it, it's sort of like a learning experience. Just as it's, you can almost think of it as a separate type of experience that as to learning how to code. So when you start writing code, you're really shit at it, and it doesn't go so well, and then you have to practice and practice and practice, and then you get better at it. Testing is basically the same sort of deal, because first you learn how to write code to get something to work. But if you have testing involved, you put other restrictions on yourself, and now you have to sort of realize, all right, I need to shape the way I write my code so that it becomes cleaner and more maintainable, testable, etc., etc. And then you have to know, how do I write efficient tests? So that is an optimized part of you. It's like learning different skill sets in a sense, and being good at different things. And if you're weak with the testing, of course it's going to take as long as the implementation logic. But if you're really good at it, it doesn't take that long. But the net time, like the time like you're going to spend, like the overall time you're going to spend on maintaining the issues and handling all the fallout from not doing these quality checks and so forth, is going to not just be measured in the fact that you don't have a safe environment to check if like your tests are running and like something changed and something broke. That's one part of it, but as I said, it's most likely also an indicator that your way of writing code is kind of shit. Because as I said, if you don't write, it's like writing, having a bad architecture. Everything will be more difficult for you, and everything will take longer to debug and fix and so forth, just because you're actually probably writing shitty software in the first place, because the testing should be simple, and maybe, well, as I said, when you do it well, it never takes as long as the implementation logic. The test is usually faster to write than the actual logic itself, but that is only true either if you know what you're doing, or, well, the business logic that you had wasn't all that complicated in the first place, and testing it is even more trivial. So what I want you to take away from this is that on average, writing unit tests should not take as long as writing the implementation logic. But I mean, if you create a button or something like that, or if you create like a single REST call that's going to connect to a database and like fetch some data or something like that, and you have to write, like, set up all the mocking and like all the interface and boilerplate that comes with the unit test suite, yes, in theory you can make that test, the writing of that test, take longer than the actual implementation. But my point the thing I want to capture is that the problem is usually that when it takes a very long time to write tests, it is because you're no good at it. Because you don't just get good at it. You have to practice at it. And it's more likely an indicator that if you're testing and like all this time actually takes a lot longer for you than the implementation itself, it's very likely it has more to do with the fact that you're not as good at this thing as you might think that you are. And you will only get better, you can only improve if you actually practice doing it. And this is something that a lot of software developers just sort of skip, because as I said, they start getting into this idea that, oh, it's more important that I ship really quickly than it is for me to write the test. But as I said, if you actually apply that mentality, it's very similar to a pharmaceutical company saying that it's cheaper for us to pay all the fines and all the lawsuits and not test our medicine and then just have people die or get diseases from that medicine. It's the same idea. You are thinking that if you can cut corners and skip the testing and like do all the quality checks, you can skip that because that lets you ship really quickly right now. But every time you do that, you add to the net time it's going to take to fix bugs, for other people to contribute, and in many cases the overall health of the system, which slows down future feature development. That is the cost that you're not measuring, and very few people understand that if you measure the total time, it's usually magnitudes of difference in terms of how long it takes you to write a unit test versus how long it actually takes you to just maintain the system. But sure, you can make an argument for that they can basically take the same amount of time. But I don't think that I think that that's a very narrow point of view to say that it always takes as long, because in my opinion it really just comes down to testing code is usually faster than writing the implementation logic, as long as you actually are good at it, and on average at the very least. Have a great day.